Welcome, everyone, to a Thursday edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, Rich Quinones, BYP. As always, hashtagging my guy, Nick Kosko, who's fighting through. He said before he's a little under the weather. He is a friggin' trooper fighting through it. He's got the Eagles and Giants this weekend. He's got the championship game in college football. Give him a follow on Twitter at Nick Kosko59, college football insider for On3 Sports. And as always, Thursday edition from our good friends over at Played Against Sports / Woodbury. Check them out online as well for all your new and used sports equipment. How you doing, brother? Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. I'm doing good. We had quite the New Year's weekend with two semifinal games. Finally, they were actually good and worth watching. You know, back to back. It's probably the best weekend of college football, at least for the playoff, since its inception. So we're going to get a very interesting national championship game on Monday when we get through the weekend. But obviously, my fandom will come out on Sunday with the Eagles, of course, before I have to mentally prepare myself for work related purposes on Monday.
Yeah, and rightfully so. And by the way, I was having fun with the Michigan fans with doing some clips and shorts, getting a little rise out of them. That game the other night, look, you and I both thought Michigan was going to win that game, especially dominating the second half. It was one of those crazy back and forth types of games. But you know this, right? There's always 1 to 2 to 3 plays in a game that turn the tide, the complexion, right? And ultimately the outcome in this case in TCU's favor over Michigan. The fourth down call, the little silly Philly that just blew up in their face. The pick six, and then again, if you want to say no touchdown ball on the one goal line situation, couldn't punch it in, you get the fumble. To me, those were 3 big time plays. You can't control sometimes the pick six. The other 2, though, they were 0 for 2 on fourth down. Michigan was. They had a horrible third down percentage rate. You had turnovers. They were giving up big plays. They were outcoached. And look, ultimately, that was TCU's game. Did you think that Michigan was going to be in trouble when they couldn't convert that fourth down early on? Did that set the tone in your estimation?
It set the tone, but I didn't think it was going to be Michigan's death sentence, so to speak, in that game. You know, you have a shootout like that. Michigan has shown all season long that they were able to score ad nauseum. We saw it at Ohio State. You know, they put up nearly 50 points at their most hated rival. And then I look at this game against TCU. You mentioned the pick six, and is that the big game experience there for J.J. McCarthy kind of just being thrown to the wolves? Maybe a little bit, but obviously he's played in some big games already this year. He was in the playoff last year, albeit he was the backup to Cade McNamara, only got in spurts against Georgia in last year's semifinal. But, Max Duggan obviously played like a Heisman contender for TCU. He put the team on his back once again. It was a very opportunistic Horned Frogs defense as well. So, like you, I'm not going to blame the pick sixes, the turnovers right there that led to TCU scores. But the 2 plays that do stick out were that fourth down call, the fact that they had no goal line offense. I believe it was 2 or 3 possessions in total where they could not score a touchdown inside the 5. And namely, it was if you want to throw out the Philly special on fourth down for some reason, I don't know why you're doing that. I believe they didn't give the ball to Donovan Edwards enough down near the goal line. He's your best back. He's arguably better than Blake Corum, who was their star running back, who's out for the season anyway. He didn't get the ball enough, at least early on, that I thought. And then you talk about that fumble. Now, whether you want to call that a missed touchdown or not, I could have sworn he caught the ball and rolled in the end zone.
Agreed.
Maybe college has to change that rule or look at a different adaptation to the NFL rule where you're not automatically down when you catch a football and your butt hits the ground. Guys are allowed to get up. Maybe it's a safety thing in college. I'm not sure, but they might have to evaluate that. I'm not saying that as a guy who was spurned with his Michigan bet, obviously, for the semifinal, but they might have to look at that. But again, if you have the ball at the 1 yard line, you can't fumble it. You're right there knocking on the door. Quarterback sneak. We see it in the NFL. We see it in college. Don't avoid the quarterback sneak. Give it to your best running back. I don't know what happened with Jim Harbaugh on the play calling down near the goal line on New Year's Eve. But in the end, it cost them. And in the end, Rich, it actually is amazing when we're talking about it. Sitting here on Thursday, they still had a chance to win the game, if not at least tie it on that final possession with less than a minute to go. Now, again, they were backed up against the wall there, but down 6, all you need to touchdown. You tie the game in case there's a botched extra point, but extra point wins you the game, and then all of a sudden you're playing for a national title on Monday.
Yeah, and you're 100% correct in that assessment. I agree wholeheartedly. And then everyone's talking about obviously the no call targeting or not targeting, and this is what I said. I said it last week when it happened. I said it in a short on the YouTube channel Rich Q, and I tweeted out as well. You're not going to make that call in that situation because that was not your prototypical type of, you got a wide receiver, making a crossing pattern or fly route, gets cracked over the middle on a clean ball that's thrown. That was a cluster of a play, right? You were doing
Right.
everything was happening all at once. And I don't believe in that type of situation. When we talk about situational football, they're going to throw the flag. I just don't believe that. And then, look, also to be fair, the announcers, they kind of spit the bit on that one, talking about, well, you make the call, it doesn't really help. What are you talking about? It extends the game. It gives them an automatic first down, which ultimately extends a potential series for another 4 down. So I don't know where you fall with the targeting or no targeting, but look, that's a game that they didn't deserve to win, and they weren't going to throw the flag in that situation.
Yeah, bang bang play like that. It's hard to justify that again when there's no possession of the ball quite yet, and then the shoulder is leaned into. I know there was helmet to helmet contact, but the way I fall on the target, just in general, the way I fall on that targeting rule is if it's a blatant crown to crown hit, then yeah, throw the flag. I'm not on board with the automatic ejection coupled with the 15-yard penalty. I believe it should be a warning, 15-yard penalty. If you do it again, obviously you should be ejected, and then the same rule applies where you miss the rest of the game. If it's in the second half, then you miss the first half of the next game. So that's where I lie on the actual rule itself. It needs to be evaluated. I know why it's there. Obviously, first safety issues, and I know college football, the NFL, whatever you want to talk about, they're trying to make it a safety thing, protect the head. The equipment's improving, but obviously you can't avoid those bang bang plays. But you're right; they're not going to make that call in that situation. And again, I'm not going to say that this would have happened, but if Michigan happened to deserve a little bit more to win that game, do they make that call? Maybe to give them a break and give them another shot at it. But I think that the officials made the right call in the moment on a bang bang play. Now, again, if he had caught it, ran 3 steps, boom, helmet to helmet contact, then you throw the flag. But on a bang bang play like that, it has to be subjective sometimes. And I think at that point the refs made the right call, and TCU won the game fair and square.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm not going down that rabbit hole with you if they were deserving or played a little
No,
better.
I mean,
Listen,
they
it is
certainly
what it
weren't.
is.
I know we went knowing that we both picked Michigan.
Yeah, right.
I think we both wanted to see them in the title game, see Jim Harbaugh coach for a national title, but no, TCU easily deserved to win that game a lot more. They came out firing from the first drive, right? Obviously with the 4th down stopping, and they basically stole the momentum from there.
The other thing that not a lot of people were talking about when we previewed the game last week on BYP, we were talking about the vulnerability of TCU's run defense. And we thought maybe Michigan can exploit that, at least in the second half. But you flip it, it was TCU that ran the ball exceptionally well, 263. I mean, so listen, you turn the ball over, you have a pick 6, you give up 263 something odd yards, and you give up 50 something. You're not going to win a football game when that happens.
No, now you're playing catch up, and I know they believe in JJ McCarthy. I personally believe in JJ McCarthy. He's probably going to be in the Heisman conversation going into next preseason for Michigan. But when you're putting him in that big of a spot where his entire season has been predicated on having a dominant run game. Now you look at his numbers, his stat line going into that game. I believe it was 17 touchdowns, which not great for college, but not bad either. Obviously, it depends on what kind of offense you run. But only 2 interceptions. Completion percentage was up. Yardage was up. He had a great first year as the full-time starting quarterback for Michigan. But again, when your running backs are Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards, you're going to run the football when you have an opportunistic defense, despite having lost Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo from last year. But your pass rush is still one of the best in the country, and your offensive line is arguably the best in the country. What are you going to do, Rich? You're going to run the football. You're going to run the football with your 2 running backs, maybe even your 3rd running back, and McCarthy's going to play, the quote-unquote game manager role. Now, can he be great? Can he air down the field? And did he give more to the offense than Cade McNamara did? Yes, he did. But in that big of a spot where you're trailing by double digits, you're trailing by a few scores in a playoff game where a trip to the national title is on the line, it's a lot of pressure for the young man. And again, now, do I think he could do it if given another chance next year with another year of development? Absolutely. But obviously, there's more to the future about Michigan that I'm sure we can get into. But as far as the way Michigan handled that game, I don't know. It was just very weird seeing them kind of be frozen, be a deer in the headlights on the goal line. And when that happens, you're setting yourself up for failure right there. But TCU, again, a very opportunistic team, another team that I thought was good, just wasn't as good as Michigan. They're going to take advantage of that, and they're going to step on your throat with that.
No, those are excellent points you bring up, because you're right. I mean, it was almost like panic started to set in. And when you don't convert on 4th down, and as you mentioned, you're playing, panic football, or you're trying to chase 2 points. You're giving team that's an underdog a ton of momentum. And more importantly, you're giving them confidence. They were just physically the more superior team you mentioned about Michigan's future. So I feel like we have this conversation all the time. And it's funny, we talked about it last week. And now the rumblings, here you go. Wilkes out of Carolina, open up that checkbook, go and get Harbaugh. So, I mean, I'll ask you again. I mean, is there any shot after what we just saw that Harbaugh says, I've done what I needed to do. I'm going back to the NFL.
So it's very interesting because Harbaugh left this up for, I want to say, interpretation. So
Correct.
obviously the reports that came out were the Athletic reported that he would take a job if offered. Now, that was namely the Denver Broncos. Now, the Panthers were in the mix now because he supposedly, or at least reportedly, had a phone call with David Tepper, not a formal interview, just a conversation, probably to gauge where he's at. There's no doubt he wants to go back to the NFL, but he has to determine if he wants to do it, if he is not willing to deal with the ever-changing college football landscape with the transfer portal, NIL. But again, he might have those worries, Rich, but at least if I'm Jim Harbaugh, what I can bring to the table is I've managed it so far. We're at the top of the Big Ten over Ohio State over the last 2 calendar years. We've made the playoff. Who's to say we can't do it again in 2023 and actually win a national title? Now, can they take the next step and be the Georgias, be the Alabamas, heck, even be a team like this year, like TCU? TCU came out of nowhere this year. They weren't even ranked in the preseason. So there's a lot of factors going against them coming back. But again, there's a lot more that are going to be better for him to come back because, he actually was quoted yesterday by some other report down in the Charlotte area that he anticipated, once again, that he's going to be back in coaching Michigan in 2023. Yeah. But of course, he added the caveat, which was, but we never know. He turns all biblical and Jesus on us and says, well, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. A wise man doesn't think about the future. He just kind of lets it come and lets it come to him. So do I still think he's going to go to the NFL? I think there's always a chance he's going to go back. He interviewed for a job last year. He was trying to get that Vikings job last year. Yeah. The Broncos are obviously interested. The Panthers are interested. I'm sure Jim Irsay and the Colts will definitely be interested. So there's a chance. Yes. Do I think he's going to go? I have to stick to my guns and say he's going to be back at Michigan at least for one more year before he says, you know what, I'm tired of this. What I do think, Rich, what could happen, and this is just me speculating, if he comes back next year in 2023, no matter how the season goes, let's just say he loses to, beat Ohio State again, they could be 12-1, 13-0, win the Big Ten, whatever the case may be. Beats Ohio State again, this time they win a national title, or at least get to the title game. I think regardless, if they get that far, he will go after next year. But someone's going to open the checkbook because we know how the NFL cycle works. Someone's going to get fired, and someone's going to be willing to pay Jim Harbaugh an absorbent amount of money.
And I can appreciate the biblical reference. Going to Sunday school for so many years and church on Sundays. That's the translation is basically, don't forget to put the money in the collection plate. So at the end of the day, right, who's going to open that checkbook? But 2 things. If he's contemplating going to the NFL, and we hate speculating coaches are going to get fired, but that's the nature of the beast. After this weekend, Black Monday, 5, 6, 7 guys might be out of a job. You look at Denver. That is a cluster of a situation with a $240 million quarterback that seems to be lost and not right. You look at Carolina, they don't have a quarterback. I'm looking at some other team, who's going to say what's going to happen in Arizona? I mean, think about it now. What's going to happen with New York and Robert Saleh? They're trending down right now, keeping receipts and whatnot. So there's going to be some openings. I'm going to throw you a curveball now.
Can't wait to hear this.
The Dallas Cowboys get bounced in the divisional playoff. And they don't just lose. They lose because, once again, Mike McCarthy's time management just basically screws them. It's a bad loss. Jerry Jones is just pissed off. And all of a sudden, a day or 2 later, you see the presser. They're going in a different direction. And by Tuesday or Wednesday, after this announcement, all of a sudden, you're going to hear the buzz. We're going to go after Harbaugh. That's the guy. That's a young guy. He's been around. Forget about this Sean Payton nonsense. We want that guy. We need a change. We need a leader. We need a guy that's been there, that's had success in the NFL. Granted, McCarthy won a Super Bowl. I don't know how the hell he did it, but still he did it, probably because of the quarterback. That's the scenario I'm going to paint for you right now. And again, I'm telling you, that's not going to be out of the realm of possibility.
No, it absolutely won't. It's not really as much of a curveball as maybe you're making it out to be, because Jerry Jones is going to open up his wallet. Yeah. Jerry Jones will absolutely open up his wallet for Jim Harbaugh. Now, the timing is going to be very interesting because you mentioned if they're one and done, whether that's in the first round, if they lose to Tampa Bay, let's say, because they'll be locked in. Tampa Bay's locked into that 4th seed. Let's just say Dallas gets the 5th seed and Philadelphia wins the division. So they're going at Tampa Bay. Now, can they beat Tampa Bay? Absolutely. I think Dallas is a more talented team right now. But if they win that game and lose the next one, they don't get back to the championship game, because that seems to be the barometer right now for Jerry Jones and the Cowboys. We have not been in an NFC championship game since the 90s. We have not been there in so long. If we can't even get there, then what are we doing wrong? Look yourself in the mirror.
Correct.
Do I see Jim Harbaugh being a target for Jerry Jones? Absolutely, I could see that. And again, that's just me speculating. I have no insight to that whatsoever. But do I think that happens? Probably not. It depends on the timing. Is Jim Harbaugh willing to? Now, I'm not gonna say he's gonna burn a bridge at his alma mater because of what he's done, especially the last couple of years. But what if he leaves in mid-January? Now we're going past now. We're approaching, the scouting combine, the draft, the Super Bowl, the second signing day. We're in that whole college football offseason gray area now.
Yeah.
What happens there? Do you spurn them now? It would have been better to spurn Michigan now instead of then.
Yeah, that's a fair point. No, it's an interesting conversation to have, because there's always those names in college. I should say in college football, and also some of those former NFL coaches, right? The recirculation, the retreading of the coaches, if you will. All right, so let's get to that second game, which I thought was a hell of a game, man. And again, that's just another example of a team that is just going to flex their muscle when they need to. And we're talking about Georgia and against Ohio State. Obviously, I thought the complexion of the game changed when Marvin Harrison Jr. Goes out of the lineup. I mean, the kid's just an absolute stud. But you also saw that veteran leadership. You saw kind of shine through with Georgia. Me watching the game, I never doubted that they were going to come back and win that game. I just never did.
Yeah, no, I was the same way. I would say now, was that game a lot closer than I thought it was going to be? Yeah, I thought it was going to be close for a while, as we talked about last week. But, I mean, my goodness, I can't believe it was actually that close. Excuse me. So when I look at Ohio State right there, I'm thinking to myself, C.J. Stroud might pull this off. They're down by 1 point. All he needs a field goal. Now, you feel bad for Noah Ruggles, the kicker who missed the field goal and just I absolutely just shanked it to the left. But,
yeah,
he put him in position. So if that didn't erase any doubts about C.J. Stroud and what he can be as an NFL quarterback, we talk about system quarterbacks. I know that has been thrown around a little bit, obviously in NFL circles, but a lot of people talk about C.J. Stroud as a guy who's just a product of Ryan Day's system.
right.
Well, couldn't you make that argument about Justin Fields? Look what he's doing right now. Now, is Justin Fields a better quarterback than C.J. Stroud was at that time and is now? Yeah, I would say so. And can Fields bring the extra dynamic of running the football? He absolutely can. But, Ryan Day, he is a quarterback whisperer of sorts. Now, of course, every quarterback is a part of a system. C.J. Stroud showed me a lot against Georgia. Now, moving forward, does that give me concerns about Georgia's defense? Maybe, but only because TCU can score in bunches. We saw that against Michigan. Now, does Georgia have a better defense than Michigan? Yes, but when you're TCU and you put up 51 points in a semifinal game against an undefeated team, that's the number 2 team in the country that was expected to go to the national championship at this point. I have my concerns about Georgia, but in the end, it's like you mentioned the veteran leaderships that's embedded at quarterback. Kirby Smart's been here before. He just finally won the title last year. He's been in 2 title games now as a head coach of Georgia. This is now his 3rd. I mean, I still got to lean Georgia in this one. So, but to your point about ever being worried about Georgia, not really. I was just a little bit surprised how close it was in the end. And basically, you're hanging on until the ball drops on New Year's Eve when that kick goes wide left as well. So I give Ohio State all the credit in the world. That would have been something to see, at least for just dramatic purposes, to see Ohio State make the title game while they lost to Michigan. They're only lost of the year. Michigan's down here, but Ohio State says, You know what? We lost to you, but we're moving on anyway. But very close. But no, I was never in doubt about Georgia at all during that game.
Stroud put up monster numbers, 23, 34, 348, 4 touchdowns, had another 24, 30 something odd yards on the ground. But I look at Georgia, to me, the kid Bennett, there's something about this kid, man. I don't know how good of a pro quarterback this kid's going to be, right?
He has a winning swagger about him. I don't know what it is.
He's got the ice in the veins.
Yeah.
He really, he does. And
it's really, it's interesting you bring that up. It's really hard to explain because this kid was a walk-on
that's right.
at this school 5-6 years ago. All right. Then he transferred to a JUCO and then he came back.
Yep.
And even then, Kirby Smart was like, well, we got this kid, JT Daniels, former 5-star prospect across the wire by all the services. He came over from USC because he got hurt and he needed a new opportunity because he basically got replaced by the two guys that were behind him. So give him a shot. Didn't really pan out. Bennett comes in, and then all of a sudden we're looking at 2021 where, okay, this is the year now for JT Daniels. This is the year for JT Daniels. Bennett steps in. He's like, nah, this is my job. I got it.
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing.
And you see it.
Not undefeated season, but they get into the playoff, despite the loss to Alabama in the title game. So then they go to the playoff, win, and then they say, you know what? Bennett's like, I'm gonna pick up my bootstraps, and all of a sudden they beat Alabama, big bad Nick Saban, and then Kirby Smart gets his first title, and this kid comes back. He could have left last year. He said, I'm gonna come back and do it again, and he's one game away from doing it again. I can't comprehend it.
Nah, listen, sometimes you just, like I said, there are some guys that they're winning players. He's a winning player. That's a winning program. Now, you have the two teams colliding right for the national championship, and the game has actually been bumped up a half a point. That's because Matrix Mac, I think, put another 1.5 on TCU plus 370, right? So 5.5 million to win. You got the odds at 12.5. It pushed, obviously, with the juice to 13 at plus 370. It's a huge line for a national championship game like that. That's almost saying this is if you go to sleep, you'll wake up and it's 35-10. But you know what? That be damned. I learned my lesson because of what happened last week. And we've seen upsets before in national championship games. I think if you're TCU, you forget about the house money. You truly believe that offensively, if you can establish the run and take pressure off that offensive line and limit that front by Georgia, right? Limit them, winning the battle in the trenches. At least you can slow the pace, the momentum, possessions, flip the field, and kind of keep it that grind it out type of game. And when your shot is there, maybe open it up a little bit with play action. But I think they're going to have to try to run the ball first and foremost, because we know Georgia's going to stack the box. And then what happens if they say, we dare you to throw and try to beat us?
Well, so far it's been working out for TCU, and Max Duggan, Quentin Johnston's gonna be an NFL caliber wide receiver as well. So now with that line at double digits, now I'm almost inclined to say hedge your bets, take TCU with the points, but then take the Georgia money line, because I firmly believe that Georgia is going to win this football game.
But better defense, real quick, Nick. Better defense, Michigan or Georgia?
Georgia's a better defense.
Okay, and look, my point is it false clipping, so to speak, what TCU was able to do on the ground against Michigan? Is that an aberration, or just they controlled the line of
scrimmage? No, I don't think.
I
think they firmly can do that. You just didn't see it often because of their Big 12 caliber of opponents. Now, the Big 12 is notorious for, history-wise, all offense, no defense.
Of course,
it's slightly changed over the last couple of years. TCU is a good defense. I mean, they've limited teams to lower than what their standard is, scoring-wise on offense. But
can they do that against Georgia, though? Can they run?
It depends, though. I mean, they prove they can run the football without star running back Kendre Miller, who is going to be questionable for TCU. That's what Sonny Dykes said earlier this week. So now if he is going to play, they just have an extra dynamic at running back. But, I mean, don't forget, you're still dealing with the dual threat quarterback. Duggan's not afraid to just lower the shoulder a la Josh Allen and just run you over and put the team on his back. So if you want to load the box, fine. He'll beat you over the top. They love those one-on-one matchups with Johnston. I think he can absolutely burn this secondary. We saw what the Ohio State wide receivers were doing. It obviously changed the game a little bit when Marvin Harrison Jr. went out for the Buckeyes in the semifinal game. So I would not be surprised if this turns into a shootout. Now, like last week I said, a shootout for TCU and Michigan that favors TCU. And sure enough, it pretty much did. I just still thought Michigan was going to win. In this case, I'm going to do the same thing. It favors TCU, but Georgia's still going to win this game because they proved they could score too. Stetson Bennett can air it out. He doesn't, I know his stat line didn't really quite back it up, but the guy was a Heisman finalist for a reason this year because he captained this team. He piloted this offense to an undefeated season. He can do it again. So Georgia does have the better defense. Can they force TCU into more mistakes? I believe so. But that line is so huge. I'm very tempted to just take TCU outright, but I mean, I find it hard to pick against Georgia for the outright win, though.
So I think you mentioned TCU's offense and the kid Johnson, and obviously the quarterback. I think the matchup there is against Georgia's secondary because the kid exploded against Michigan. What was it, 6 for like $163 and a touchdown in the Fiesta Bowl? So again, you're taking on now a Georgia secondary that's coming off its worst 2 outings of the season, right? They allowed 502 yards, passing against LSU in the SEC championship game, another 348 against Ohio State in the Peach Bowl. So to me, and I pulled up the numbers, 54 of 86 passing, 63%, 2 picks, 7 touchdowns against Kirby Smart's group. They're the last 2 quarterbacks. So I think there's going to be opportunity, but they have to try to run it early, soften up that defense. I think this game actually might hit the over, believe it or not.
And when the total's at what currently?
It's moved. Hold on a second. As I'm looking it up, but what do you think about that for a moment? Just,
that is the way you have to soften up Georgia's defense. If you're able to basically establish an authority and run the football, which they can do, it's just a matter of, are you going to have more success against Georgia's defense,
right,
like you did against Michigan? That to me is your biggest question. Now, you mentioned it opens up the play action game. If we're talking just, basic X's, if we're just talking about basic X's and O's, yeah, you want to establish the run so you can pass. All right, that's an old adage of football. I believe simplicity is going to end up winning this football game for TCU. Now, they have to still have that opportunistic defense. They had 2 pick sixes against Michigan. Can they do that again? Probably not. Georgia's going to be a little bit safer with the football. Stetson Bennett is a little bit safer with the football. He's not quite the gunslinger, at least in my mind, that J.J. McCarthy is. But if TCU has an opportunity to pounce on something, you take your chances because, you mentioned before, they're playing with the house money. Georgia has the pressure on them trying to win back-to-back titles and finish this year undefeated. So if I'm TCU, maintain your opportunistic defense and, basically try to soften them up early. You can if you open up a lead early on, then I would say they're in good shape.
Yeah, it's 62 and a half 3 hours ago.
Oh, I think that's going to go over. I feel like that's going to go over.
That's what I'm saying.
That's pretty low.
Here's another thing. Let's just say they're down, 35-17. And there's 10 minutes left. And then boom, you get that 35-20, you get the backdoor cover 38, 35-28, or maybe a pick six. It's just a way. See, I don't even believe they're playing with house money anymore. I actually believe that you beat big bad Michigan. Well, why can't we go in there and beat Georgia? Like I believe the first couple series are going to dictate the tone, and they can somehow turn out some yards and positive yards the first couple possessions, not 3 and outs. Keep it defensively. Contain Georgia. Don't let them explode and you're down 10-0 all of a sudden, because then you panic. You still want to try to run the football. If they can get the ground game going in this game, I'm telling you right now, this can be a game where they've got a puncher's chance in the fourth quarter, and anything happens.
Right, and it's one of those things where, just to be a little bit philosophical about this right now, TCU was the team that nobody wanted in the playoffs.
Nope.
If you remember.
There you go.
They lost to Kansas State. Everyone's like, oh, there it is. That's the door. The door is now slightly open to knock them out for again, I thought they still should have been in despite the loss to Kansas State. But again, they played them twice, lost in the conference title games, their only loss of the year. I thought they should have still been in the playoff. And rightly so, they're in, and now they're in the title game. But they were the team that nobody wanted in. Lost to Kansas State. USC was already in, but now you're like, well, time to open the door now for Ohio State and Alabama. How do we get those teams in? So I think they are playing with house money in that respect, because they're the team that is disrespected, and they didn't want to be, or they were the team that nobody wanted in. So they beat Michigan. Jim Harbaugh, can he finally do it? Nope. Georgia, repeat? Maybe the answer is no, because of TCU and what Sonny Dykes has done in his first year with the Horned Frogs.
So are you backing your play? Are you laying your 12.5, 13 with TCU? Are you going
with that line? Yes.
Or are you going ML? You go money line.
I don't know about money line. That's tough. Like I said, I might hedge my bets and just be.
That's the fever talking right now, because you're on the
weather. Yeah. I'm in an absolute daze right now. To be honest with you, Rich, I really think Georgia is still going to win this football game, but that line is just so big. I really can't see that based on the way the last 2 games were played. Georgia's played some tough games this year, but oh man, that is very tempting. 12.5, 13.5. What are we going to get on Monday? I might wait till Monday to make my official decision if I'm going to put it on TCU.
Listen, before I let you get out of here again, Nick Kosko joining us, College Football Insider on 3 Sports. Give him a follow at Nick Kosko 59. All right. Listen, it's the role reversal here, right? I'm sitting here with my guys. We don't even have to worry about showing up on Sunday. All of a sudden, the Philadelphia Eagles have to buckle up and play a game and win for home field advantage. So I threw out this scenario a little earlier in the week. If it's say a 16-6 type of game, Eagles winning, Hurts is in there, but he's taking some hits. I think that's when Sirianni goes, come on, you're coming out.
Yeah, probably. I firmly believe that he is going to start on Sunday. So I think they just need the offense to get going. But if it is one of those games, like you mentioned, where it's close, but maybe the Giants pull the dogs off. But again, Hurts is taking some unnecessary hits. And I think you're right that he'll just be like, you know what, we're putting Gardner in. You have a 10-point lead in the third quarter. Maybe we have to, we're going to rest you, or maybe we'll try to get like a 17-point lead and then pull you. Because I think the Giants, to be frank, should they play anybody? No. From a fan perspective, absolutely not. But from a logistical standpoint, Giants shouldn't play anybody. They're locked into the 6th seed. They're going to go to Minnesota. They're going to go to San Fran, most likely, or probably Minnesota.
Minnesota.
The way it's shaping out right now, probably going to go to Minnesota, have a rematch with them. So why risk anybody? Because now we talk about house money, Rich. The Giants are playing with house money in the playoffs this year.
Yeah, and I was going back and forth in my head. I was going back with Brandon on 27Q and my buddies. We were texting each other. They said, "What do you do? What do you do?" And I was like, "This isn't 2007. They won it. It was Coughlin who said we're going to play New England, and it worked out. And they wanted to try to prevent them from going undefeated, and they got them when they needed to in Arizona in the Super Bowl. The Giants are a thin team right now. They're very thin at wide receivers. McKinney came back. He's still banged up. Williams is banged up. And Jones loves the RPO, the run, the scramble. I don't need to see him taking more hits. I don't see Saquon. He's already had a career high in carries. I said 360 for the year. I think he's around 350 plus. So I hate that I'm flip-flopping and wavering, but new regime, new GM, new head coach. You get back in the playoffs for the first time in 6 seasons, maybe a series or two, but if you don't play them, I'm going to be okay with that because I think the circumstances were a little different.
Well, to keep it simple, you don't bite off more than you can chew right now.
And here's something else no one's talking about. I think in 2009, the Saints, they lost 2 or 3 in a row and they rested players, and then they came back and they won their divisional matchup. They won the NFC Championship and they wound up winning the Super Bowl. If memory serves me correct, 9-10 because the Giants were 10-11. So right. This whole, the momentum you play. I mean, if under different circumstances, right, I would say, okay, but I'm kind of torn because I really, after what transpired Monday night, which was a fluke accident, just a fluke injury, I'm a little worried. Like, I don't need Daniel Jones to take extra hits. I don't.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that just goes to show what these teams should be doing, regardless of their playoff positioning. If they're locked into a spot and if you have nothing to play for, then I think rest is never a bad thing. Especially in the NFL, everyone talks about momentum. So, yeah. Do you kill your momentum by resting these guys? I don't think so. If you're a good team, you're a good team, and you're going to play the next week at full strength, hopefully, or as close to it as possible, without putting your guys into harm's way. And I think, you hate to put it on the Monday night incident with DeMar Hamlin, which is also a freak. It was a freak accident, freak occurrence in a football game. You hate to put that into everybody's brain going into the final weekend of the regular season. But I think you have to take that into account where it's like, on the broad spectrum of it, don't do unnecessary damage. Now something like that might not happen every day, but the shoulder, the knee, the head. You get
skittish. You get a little skittish.
You get a little skittish. You're right. But and I think at that point you have to say, don't do the unnecessary. Yeah. If it's not necessary, take a step back, take a breather, get at it, get after it next week in the playoffs where it counts now, where it absolutely counts.
Yeah, 100% agree. All right, pal. I always appreciate a couple moments. Everyone give Nick a follow on Twitter at Nick Kosko 59. Check out On 3 Sports. Give him a follow as well. He does a great job covering college. Does a ton. What are you wrestling? High school sports down in this area. Ginger brandy, a little hot toddy. Sweat it out. You'll be good to go.
Oh, I know the old adage. I've done this many a time when the calendar turns to January. Don't you worry.
Appreciate you jumping on BYP, pal.
Appreciate it, Rich.